The views and opinions expressed in the following podcast are those of the man himself, Tyler, and do not reflect those of his employer, affiliates, networks, family, pets, the goldfish he flushed down the toilet in 3rd grade, his mechanic, or that bird that keeps getting in his vent, obviously. Please stand by for the Tyler Woodward Project.
Interrupt this program to bring you an important announcement.
Oh my God.
Quick question before we get into today's episode. When's the last time your phone died and for like 20 minutes before you found that charger, you were actually kind of relieved? Not panicked, relieved. Now, I'm not mocking you if that's happened to you. I'm asking, well, basically because it's happened to me more times than I care to admit at this point. And I think that really says, it says something. I'm Tyler. Thanks for being here today. This show is about things that used to work and the people quietly keeping them running and who's profiting off the decline. Today, I want to talk about dumb phones and weird earbuds and vinyl records and why it feels like everybody my age and younger all of the sudden wants their stuff to be simpler and dumber and more broken, but, in a good way. And before we get rolling, the standard disclaimer, these are my opinions. Not anybody I work for, not anybody that I am affiliated with. Just me thinking out loud. Okay, so here's the confession. And it's a little embarrassing. I've been reading about this whole dumb phone thing, this whole going analog thing. Wired earbuds again, notebooks, vinyl, CDs, all of it, for weeks now. And I have to admit, feeling a little smug about it, honestly. Like, I told you so. I've mentioned it before on this show. Now, I had before my first smartphone, I had a Samsung 2-step. That phone was sweet. Do you remember that? It was a flip phone, but it had the little rotary, thing on the front, kind of like an iPod for the built-in MP3 player. That was the big selling point of the phone. It had that little scroll wheel on the front, doubling as the MP3 player, and it still just made calls and sent text just like any other phone at that time. And it was fine. Actually, it really was better than fine. And then last night, I caught myself doom scrolling, in bed at midnight on the exact kind of algorithm feed, that algorithm fed nonsense that I'm about to spend the next however many minutes complaining about. So, grain of salt. I'm not coming at this from some, high horse. I've got the same problem everybody else has. I've just been starting to pay a little closer attention as to why. So, real quick, my own history with this. I had flip phones well past when I should have. Had an iPod too. Actually, one with the little click wheel. One of those. And looking back, that thing might have been the last genuinely good era of this stuff because you bought the songs, 99 cents per track, maybe $1.29, and it was yours. Nobody could revoke it. Nobody could pull it off of there because, a licensing deal changed somewhere upstream. My first actual smartphone was an HTC Pro 7, a Windows phone. Nobody remembers that phone. Don't worry about it. Then, I had one of the Samsung Galaxies after that. I can't recall which model, but I had one. And then I landed on the iPhone 5C, which, side note, mine was lime green. If you couldn't tell by all the imaging and colors I use in the art for this podcast, lime green, that acid kind of yellowish green, is one of my favorite colors. And I've stayed in the iPhone ecosystem ever since. And I remember specifically thinking when I got that first one, the little HTC with the QWERTY slide out keyboard, that this is going to make my life easier. And it did for, like a week. And then it just became this other job, this other sort of hassle. Another thing to manage, another thing buzzing at me. And I bring that up because I used to think that was just me, being weird about it. Slow to adopt or whatever. Turns out I might have been ahead of something instead of behind it for once. There was a survey, summer of 2024, and it found that something like more than a quarter of Gen Z said they were interested in getting a dumb phone. Calls, text, the alarm clock. That's all you need. Done. Check. You don't need anything else. And almost the same number of millennials said the same thing. That's a real legitimate polling number. That's not some sort of vibe, not a TikTok trend piece. Now, the actual sales of these things, they're still tiny. And when I mean tiny, like 2% of phones sold in this country, sort of tiny. So there's this massive gap between people saying they want this and people actually going out and doing it. And I don't think that gap means, people are lying or anything. I think it means going back is a little harder than it sounds. Because, think about it. You need your phone for all sorts of things nowadays. You need it to check your, schedule your doctor's appointments, order your refills. You need it for your banking. You need it for your kid's school app because that's where you get the grades and the release forms. And you need it for directions. You need it for work. Nobody's actually going to go out and throw their smartphone into the lake. So, instead, people are doing it in pieces. So if it's not really about the phone, what is it about? There was another poll. This one paired with a guy who wrote the big book about kids and phones. And they asked Gen Z a pretty simple, blunt question. Do you wish this thing had never been invented? When they asked about the smartphone itself, about 1 in 5 said, yeah. When they asked about TikTok specifically, basically half of them said yes. Same story with one of the other big platforms. It was half again. Think Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or any of those. It was half. So from that data point, it's not really about the phone. I don't think anybody's really mad at the phone itself, the device, the little rectangle deal. They're mad at what got built on top of it. The feed. You know what I'm talking about. The thing designed to make you open it 40 times a day, sit there for an hour plus, and not really know why or what you did in that hour. The same thing's happening with wired earbuds. Weirdly, I know. There's a research firm that tracks actual sales data on this. Not some sort of anecdotes. After years of wired headphones just dying off, sales shrinking every single year, they had a real bounce back recently. I mean, it was a small bounce back, but it trended in the other direction. Wireless, obviously still owns something like 2/3 of the market, all right? So let's not kid ourselves. But it moved. For the first time in years, it moved the other direction. And I don't think that's mostly about audio quality. I think some of it is just a cord doesn't need charging. A cord doesn't have an app. A cord isn't trying to sell you a subscription for noise cancellation. It just works. And then it's done working the moment you unplug it. And nothing about it is trying to learn anything about you while you use it. And then there's vinyl, which honestly blows the other two out of the water in terms of actual numbers. Almost 2 decades straight of growth. They just crossed $1 million in revenue again, first time in 40 years. And it's not just old guys like me buying reissues of stuff we already owned back in the day on cassette. Young people are a huge documented part of this. Some of that's nostalgia for, a thing they never even experienced firsthand, which is its own sort of weird phenomenon. I'm not going to pretend I fully understand it. Some of it's just wanting something that you can hold physically in your hand. You can put on a shelf. You can put it over there on the table. Something that isn't, a subscription. Something a company can't quietly take away because they lost the licensing rights. And look, I'm not exempt from this one. I've started buying CDs again. Vinyl too, but mainly CDs. I like to rip them and put them on Plex Amp and take that around as my streaming service on my phone. Some of it's honestly, that is more about sound quality. A good pressing sounds way better. A vinyl pressing sounds way better than a compressed MP3 stream. Think Spotify or YouTube Music. Apple Music sort of excluded because they do have the lossless audio. Some of it's the album art, actually holding the thing. reading the liner notes instead of just squinting at a thumbnail on your phone. And some of it, if I'm being honest, is just knowing what Spotify and the other streaming guys pay out. It's a fraction of a cent per stream. I did an episode on this a few weeks back. tylerwoodward.me/links if you want to go back and listen to it. We broke down the metrics of how artists are getting paid. Basically, what it comes down to, if I like an artist enough to keep listening to him, especially more than once, buying the record is the only way I really know my money's landing anywhere near that artist. And it's not just music either. The same exact thing is happening with video games right now. Sony just announced this year that they're looking to end physical game discs completely starting in 2028. Honestly, that writing's been on the wall for a little while now. Current PlayStations don't even come with disc drives anymore. At least standard. You have to buy it separately, and it's been capped at one per order because people are scrambling to grab the last one before the door shuts on it. But, it's something like 80% of game sales are already digital. Think Steam. Nothing physical on there. And here's the part that actually makes that makes the whole point for me. This licensing thing isn't hypothetical. Sony has literally purchased content off of people's PlayStation libraries before. Movies that people have paid for, gone. Because a licensing deal with a studio ended. Over 1,000 shows at once, one time just wiped off the service. Usually there's no refund. It's sitting right there in the terms of service. The content is licensed to you, not owned by you. And a license, well, that can always be revoked. And it's not just Sony. Apple's done the same thing with iTunes purchases before. People bought movies, actually paid money for them, logged in one day and found them gone. Apple's answer, more or less, was, well, we're just the storefront. Go take it up with the studio. So it's not just your music collection anymore. It's your game collection too. And apparently your movie collection, no matter whose logo is on that storefront, same pattern, different shelf, it's all the same. And that licensing thing actually matters here. It's the other half of this whole story, because while all of this is happening on the consumer side, people wanting simpler stuff, less algorithms, more ownership, of course, what does the industry do? The industry side is doing the exact opposite. Streaming prices keep going up. Yeah, like cable in satellite. Every tier, ad tier, standard, premium, all of it. Again, recently, all going up. And there was a big survey that found something like half of people now say they're paying too much for streaming. Almost as many say the content isn't even worth what they're actually paying for anymore. Case in point, myself and my family. Netflix had been a staple in this household since 2008, 2009, when it was like $8 a month. We kept it up to about 8 months ago until it finally hit damn near $30 a month. And now, yeah, there's a few good shows on Netflix, occasionally a good Netflix only movie or whatever, but not nearly worth $30 a month. So Netflix got canned until Stranger Things came out. We subscribed to it to watch that, And then once the final season was done, Netflix was out the door again. And, at the same time, you've got these massive media companies either merging or splitting apart depending on which way the money's blowing that quarter. One deal just closed. Another company is splitting itself back into two. Basically, undoing a merger they did a couple of years ago. It's the same handful of executives shuffling the same assets around, trying to find whatever configuration squeezes out the most cash before the next earnings call. So you've got this whole ecosystem that keeps getting more expensive and more consolidated and more designed around extracting value from you instead of giving you something worth paying for. And then you wonder why somebody looks at this whole mess and goes, you know what? I'm just going to go buy the damn record. So a few things I keep coming back to on this. One, this was never really about, hating the technology. Almost nobody actually wants to go back to a flip phone, at least permanently, myself included, if I'm being honest. It's about hating what got built on top of all this wonderful technology. The fucking algorithm, the subscription, the thing designed to be addictive on purpose. Another one, the gap between wanting this and doing this is real. And it's not people being lazy or being fake about it. It's genuinely hard to opt out of these systems that are built to be inescapable. So people are doing it in little chunks and little bits and little pieces at a time. Think a record player here, a CD player there, a pair of wired headphones, one deleted app at a time. Last one. And this one actually bugs me probably the most. The industry isn't responding to any of this by trying to get simpler or cheaper or more honest, because why would you? It's doing the opposite. Raising the prices, consolidating, betting that you'll complain about it on a podcast. I'm pointing at myself. Or screaming into the echo chamber of social media. And then we keep paying anyways. I'm just venting here. I don't have a good answer for any of this. I really wish I did. I think the honest takeaway is just, pay attention to what you're actually mad at, because most of the time it's not the device. It's not the technology. It's whatever is running on it and whoever's cashing in on you not being able to put that thing down. That's the show for the day. If you want to keep up with it, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. And you can find everything else at tylerwoodward.me. If you want ad-free episodes, Apple Podcasts, TWP Plus. It's finally live. Finally got Apple to flip the switch on that. God, that took way longer than I thought it would. And if you want to buy me a cup of coffee just to say thanks and appreciate what I'm doing here, you can do that at tylerwoodward.me as well. So, yeah, that's the show. Oh, also go leave a voicemail. Maybe you'll end up on the show. tylerwoodward.me/voicemail. I'll catch you next week.